The desert wind rolled through the broken fence rails and over the dry earth like a whisper from something long dead. The sun hung low and mean in the sky, baking the ground, bleaching the bones of cattle that hadn't survived the last drought. It was the kind of day that peeled the skin off your back if you didn't keep to the shade. But there wasn't much shade in the Riggs yard, only the warped shadow of a barn long past saving and the slouching figure of a girl too thin for her boots. Rosalind May's hands trembled as she clutched the rusted handle of a water pail. The well had taken its time coughing up the last few inches, and her arms screamed from the effort. Her sleeves were rolled up, revealing pale skin blotched red from sun and work. She was 17 and looked 15, all elbows and bones, her hair pulled back with a frayed ribbon that once belonged to someone who smelled of lilac and sang lullabies before the world soured. "Move faster, girl." Malcolm Riggs barked from the porch, half a bottle deep and slouched in his chair like a sack of bad luck. She flinched and picked up her pace, feet stumbling in the dust. The bucket sloshed, cold water splashing onto her worn shoes. She made it 3 steps closer before her knees buckled. The fall wasn't dramatic. Just a collapse, her body giving out without so much as a courtesy warning. The water spilled across the earth in a shallow pool that soaked into nothingness. Her palms scraped the dirt. The silence that followed felt more dangerous than yelling. The old man stood. The wood creaked beneath his boots as he stepped off the porch. His shoulders carried the weight of too many regrets and not enough conscience. His beard was patchy, streaked with gray and tobacco, and his eyes were the color of bruises, deep and unyielding. Rosie scrambled up, breath quick and sharp, trying to speak. I'll get more. I just need a—" The slap cracked louder than a rifle. It snapped her head sideways. Blood bloomed inside her mouth like something rotten. She didn't cry. She hadn't in years. Crying only fed him. "You good-for-nothing wisp," he growled. "You think the world owes you breath? You think just 'cause your ma died you get to be soft? You're mine and you'll earn your keep, or I'll find someone who'll make you." She stayed on the ground this time. Her cheek throbbed and the blood was metal in her mouth. The saloon down the road was full today. Smoke curled up from its open windows and laughter carried through the heat like broken glass. A poker game was underway, loud, rowdy, desperate. The sort of game that led to trouble in a town like Grayson Hollow. Malcolm spat and glanced that way. "Maybe that's just what I'll do," he muttered to no one. And then louder for her, "Get up. You ain't gonna sit there like a kicked dog while I go earn us something useful." She didn't argue. He'd find a reason to make her regret it. Instead, she dragged herself to the fence post and leaned against it, eyes following him as he staggered toward town, bottle in hand and hate in his spine. She thought he'd just disappear into the saloon and leave her the quiet afternoon. But the gods weren't that kind. An hour later he came back with someone in tow. The man was tall and solid, built like a workhorse but with a limp in his left leg. His hat sat low on his head, shadowing a face carved by weather and war. Dust clung to his shirt, and a saddlebag was slung over his shoulder. A scar twisted across his jaw like an old story no one talked about. Rosie recognized him. Everyone did. Wyatt Boone. Stable hand. Widowmaker. Quiet. Always paid in coin, never in words. Folks said he'd fought in the war and come back different. Others said he was born that way. She didn't know what to believe, but the way her father was smiling made her stomach knot. "Got myself a deal, Rosie," Malcolm said, voice slurring with ugly pride. "Wyatt here needs help with his place. And you're gonna go earn your keep." She blinked. "What?" "I'm tired of feeding dead weight. You're a weak thing, and I'm done waiting for you to grow into something useful." Wyatt said nothing. His arms were crossed, eyes hard, unreadable. But not cruel. "She ain't livestock," he said eventually, voice low and rough. "Ain't part of the agreement." Malcolm snorted. "She's mine to do with. I'm giving her to you. You can work her or let her rot in the barn, I don't give a damn. You take her off my hands and you get 2 weeks of stable work from me." That was the bet. "You bet me your daughter," Wyatt said flatly. "I bet a problem," Malcolm snapped. "A mouth I don't need and bones that break too easy." Wyatt looked at Rosie. Her lip was split. Her eyes were burning holes into the earth. He didn't look back at Malcolm. "I'll take her." The words dropped like iron. Rosie jerked her head up. No, I'm not." Wyatt held up a hand, not to silence her, but to steady the world. "You don't owe me nothing," he said. "You want to come, you come. You want to stay, you stay. But this man's done with you." Malcolm laughed like he'd just heard the best joke in town. "Oh, she's yours now. See how long you last." Then he turned and walked away. And just like that, she wasn't his anymore. Rosie stood there, stunned. She didn't understand it. Wasn't sure she wanted to. Wyatt shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. You got a bag? She nodded slowly. Not much in it. That'll make the mule happier. Something almost like a smile tugged at his mouth, but it vanished before it could settle. He turned and started walking. Rosie stood still. I don't belong to you, she said quietly. No, he said without turning. You don't. She followed him. The road out of town was the same as always, dry, hot, indifferent. The trees were mostly dead, the grass too stubborn to grow, and the sky refused to rain. But something in the air had shifted. Like the rules had been rewritten in dust and blood. They walked in silence. She didn't ask where they were going. He didn't offer. But when they reached the edge of the ridge and the wind kicked up again, he glanced at her. You scared? She thought about lying. She was tired of pretending. Yes. He nodded. Good. Means you still got something to lose. The shack he brought her to was small, with smoke-stained windows and a roof that caved a little in the middle. A mule brayed from behind it, stomping in the dirt with half-hearted protest. Wyatt opened the door and stepped aside. It's not much. I've had worse, she said. He watched her walk in like she might break if the boards creaked too loud. Inside it smelled like leather and ash. A cot sat in the corner. A tin kettle rested on the stove. There were books. Real books. She ran a finger over one. You read? Sometimes. He handed her a blanket. You sleep here. You don't work if you're sick. You eat when there's food. You leave if you want. She turned to him. Why'd you take me? He didn't answer right away. Then, because someone had to. That night, as she lay on the cot with the blanket pulled up to her chin, she stared at the wooden beams above her and tried to remember the last time someone had chosen her. Not owned. Not blamed. Just chosen. It didn't make sense. It didn't need to. Not yet. But somewhere beyond the hills, Malcolm Riggs drank himself stupid and told anyone who'd listened that he'd gotten rid of the girl who'd cursed his life. And in a shack outside Grayson Hollow, that same girl closed her eyes, fists clenched beneath the blanket, and let herself believe, for just a moment, that maybe the curse was his to carry now. Not hers. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as broken as she'd been told. The morning came slow, bleeding light through the cracks in the shack's warped planks. Dust motes hung suspended like tiny ghosts, drifting through sunbeams that cut the air into gold and shadow. Rosie stirred beneath the coarse wool blanket, eyes opening to unfamiliar ceiling boards and the distant thud of hooves against packed dirt. For a brief, disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the ache in her cheek reminded her. The slap. The trade. The man with the limp and unreadable eyes. She sat up slowly. The cot creaked beneath her, protesting the movement. Her body felt sore, but not from labor, just from carrying too much weight in a frame that hadn't known rest. She listened. The only sounds were the kettle whistling softly on the stove and the rhythmic brushing of a curry comb outside. Rosie swung her feet onto the floor, boots half-laced, and shuffled toward the door. She stepped outside into a morning that smelled of horse sweat, pine smoke, and something faintly sweet. Wyatt stood beside the mule, brushing down its flanks with steady, practiced movements. His hat was already pulled low, shadowing his face. He didn't look up. Coffee's on the stove. Help yourself. Rosie didn't move. I don't owe you nothing, she said finally, arms folded across her chest like armor. He nodded once, calm as still water. Didn't say you did. I'm not a maid. Not a servant. You ain't either of those, he replied. But you're here now, and that mule eats more than both of us. I could use a hand if you're off errand. She hesitated. The word offering wasn't one she'd heard used in her direction before. Her father used words like useless, burden, girl-shaped problem. Wyatt used nothing that felt like ownership. She poured herself a mug of bitter black coffee and took it outside. It burned her tongue, but she didn't flinch. If anything, the taste helped steady her. She watched him work, methodical, quiet, focused. His limp wasn't dramatic, just part of his gait, like a rhythm his body had long since adapted to. She wondered how he'd gotten it. War probably. Men around here were always broken in pieces, and the ones who lived didn't talk about it. You run this place alone? She asked. He gave a faint nod. My brother used to live out here. So. He left last year. Family stuff. His voice caught slightly on the word family like it had teeth. She didn't press. That first day passed slow but steady. Wyatt didn't push her, didn't bark orders. He showed her where the grain was kept, how to loop the lead rope through the rail so the mule wouldn't bolt, how to sweep the stable in long strokes so the dust didn't choke the air. She wasn't strong, Her limbs trembled before the day was halfway through, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Stopping meant being seen as weak again. Stopping meant failure. Wyatt watched her, never unkind but measuring. When her shoulders sagged and her knees buckled slightly from lifting a saddle, he took it from her without a word and set it aside. "Rest," he said. "Ain't no one here keepin' score but the dirt." That night he made stew. Thin, mostly beans and potatoes, but warm and full of salt. They ate in silence. Outside, the coyotes started their nightly chorus, and the wind scratched against the windows like it was looking for a way in. "You married?" she asked, not looking at him. "No. Ever?" He stirred the stew. "Once." She glanced up, sensing weight behind the word. "What happened?" "Fire." Rosie didn't ask more. The silence that followed didn't feel awkward. Just heavy, like the kind of silence that comes from wounds too deep to patch. She finished her bowl and set it aside. "Thank you," she murmured, almost too low to be heard. He nodded, eyes still on the flames. Days passed. The rhythm settled. Morning chores. Coffee. Brushing the mule. Cleaning tack. Wyatt fixed fences. Rosie swept and fed chickens that wandered into the yard uninvited. He never raised his voice. Never touched her. Never treated her like a thing. That in itself was strange enough to make her suspicious. One afternoon, as she knelt by the water trough scrubbing its rim, she caught him watching her from the porch. Not staring, just watching like he was trying to make sense of something that didn't add up. She wiped her hands on her skirt and stood. "You think I'm broken too, don't you?" Wyatt didn't flinch. "No." "Then why do you look at me like that?" "Because you remind me of a bird that don't know it's out of the cage." Her breath hitched. She turned away, unsure what to do with that image. The idea of being free hadn't occurred to her. She'd left the cage, yes, but had she stopped carrying its bars inside her? That night, she found an old book tucked beneath a stack of saddle rags. The spine was cracked and the pages yellowed, but the ink was still readable. Leaves of Grass. She took it to the cot and read until the lantern burned low. When Wyatt passed by the doorway and saw her with it, he paused. "My wife used to read that out loud," he said. Rosie looked up. "I like the part about the soul." He gave a faint smile, almost painful in its effort. She did too. In the following days, Rosie began to find herself humming. Little bits of melodies long buried, half-remembered songs her mother sang while baking bread or brushing her hair. Wyatt didn't comment when he heard, just nodded slightly, like he recognized something he'd once known. But not all days were peaceful. One morning, Rosie stumbled coming down the steps with a bucket of oats. The wood had splintered beneath her foot and she fell hard, scraping her knees bloody. She cursed, trying to stand, and Wyatt was beside her in a heartbeat, helping her up. His hands were calloused but gentle. "I'm fine," she snapped, brushing him off. "You're bleeding." "I said I'm fine." He let go. Rosie turned away, voice trembling. "I don't need anyone rescuing me." "I'm not here to rescue you," he said. "Just to remind you you ain't alone." That broke something. Not loudly, but enough to make her throat tighten. That night, she sat beside him by the fire, legs tucked under her. She didn't talk, didn't ask questions. Just listened. The crackle of flames. The wind in the chimney. The faint creak of old bones and older regrets. Then, quiet as breath, she spoke. "My mama died when I was 9. Fever took her fast. Pa changed after. Drank more. Stopped speaking unless he was shouting. He blamed me. Said I was cursed. Said God left me alive as punishment." Wyatt didn't move, but his jaw tightened. "He used to make me stand outside at night. Said the cold would toughen me. Said weakness was a sin." "He was wrong," Wyatt said simply. Rosie stared into the fire. "You don't know me." "I know enough." The silence that followed was filled with trust neither of them said aloud. The next morning Rosie woke early. Before the sun, before the mule, before even the wind stirred the grass. She stepped outside and breathed an air that tasted like morning and possibility. She walked barefoot to the fence line, the wood cool against her palms, and looked out over the hills. She wasn't sure how long she stood there before she heard footsteps behind her. "You up early?" Wyatt said. "I didn't sleep much." He joined her at the fence. "What's out there?" she asked. He considered. "Land. Quiet. Maybe peace if you listen hard enough." She turned to him. "Do you think people like us can change?" "I think people like us already have," he said. "The rest just needs time to catch up." She nodded. Inside, the kettle began to whistle. And somewhere in the dust, something began to grow. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But surely. It would take more than peace to heal what had been broken. But maybe, just maybe, peace was a start. The days grew longer. Summer crept in with a dry, relentless heat, and the wind carried dust more often than breeze. Rosie moved through the chores like she belonged now, brushing the mule, chopping wood with a rhythm that left blisters on her palms and strength in her shoulders. Her steps grew firmer. Her voice no longer flinched when she spoke. And though she still woke sometimes with the taste of old fear on her tongue, it no longer ruled her. Wyatt watched all this in silence. He didn't praise her. Didn't need to. His quiet nods and the way he handed her the heavier shovel spoke loud enough. Respect, simple even, had been foreign currency in her old world. Here it spent well. But peace has sharp edges when it's all you've ever known is chaos. And it doesn't last without testing. Trouble arrived the way it always does in the West, on horseback, smelling of sweat, gun oil, and trouble. She was out back, feeding the mule when she heard the hoofbeats. Not Wyatt's steady, uneven gait. Not the town's scattered patrol. No, this was faster, louder. Like someone who rode with something to prove. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the front of the shack just in time to see the dust settle around a dark-coated horse and the man who dismounted like he'd done it 1,000 times before. He was younger than Wyatt but older than her, tall and lean with a crooked smile that looked practiced. His hat was worn but clean, and a pistol sat on his hip like a promise. "You must be Rosie," he said. Her spine stiffened. "Who's a skin?" The man gave a half-bow. "Name's Eli Thatcher. I'm looking for Wyatt Boone." The door creaked open behind her. "Eli," Wyatt said. The younger man turned. "You still walk like a man carrying ghosts. And you still talk like a man who thinks charm is a virtue." Eli grinned. "Ain't it?" Rosie glanced between them. "Friend of yours?" "Once," Wyatt replied. He stepped down onto the porch, not smiling. "What do you want?" Eli took a step closer. "Heard you were out here. Heard you'd picked up company." His eyes flicked to Rosie but not in the way that made her skin crawl. Still, she crossed her arms. "You heard wrong," Wyatt said. "She's not company. She's my guest." "Funny," Eli said. "'Cause rumor in Grayson Hollow says you won her in a card game." Rosie's face darkened but Wyatt didn't blink. "Rumors in Grayson Hollow are worth about as much as dry spit in a sandstorm." Eli chuckled, hands raised. "Easy. I'm not here to stir anything. I just came to talk. Maybe share a bottle. Like old times." "There's no old times left to share," Wyatt said flatly. That hung in the air. Rosie broke the silence. "You want something or are you just out here because you got lost?" Eli looked at her, more curious now. "You got bite. That'll serve you well. I've been bitten enough to learn how." Wyatt stepped between them. "You've said your piece. Time to ride back." Eli's smile faded. "You know it's not going to stay quiet, right? You think Riggs is just going to forget?" Words spreading fast. "About her. About you. About what you took." Wyatt didn't answer. "You can't outrun that kind of talk forever," Eli said. "Especially not in a town with empty bellies and loaded guns." And with that he mounted his horse, tipped his hat, and rode off. When the sound faded, Wyatt exhaled. Rosie turned to him. "Is it true? Are they talking like that in town?" He nodded once. "Some folk need stories more than truth. Makes the world easier to carry. But it's a lie." "Yes, and a dangerous one." That night, Wyatt pulled a rifle from beneath the floorboards. He cleaned it slow, methodical, the way a man does when he hopes he won't need it but knows he might. Rosie watched from the table. "You think Riggs'll come for me?" "I think he's the type that don't like being shamed. And drunk shame's the most dangerous kind." She swallowed. "I'm not afraid." He looked up, eyes tired but steady. "You should be. But don't let it decide for you." The days that followed felt heavier. Rosie went about her work, but she kept an eye on the road. Her ears stayed tuned to every horse whinny, every rustle beyond the trees. Wyatt taught her how to shoot, not with praise or pep talks, just hands-on, firm instruction. "Breathe slow," he said, positioning her fingers on the stock. "Don't fight the kick. Let it move through you." She squeezed the trigger. The rifle jerked. The tin can flew off the fence post. He didn't smile, but he handed her another bullet. By the end of the week, she could hit 3 in a row. She started sleeping with a knife beneath her pillow. Not because she expected to use it, but because it reminded her that she could. Then one evening the storm came. Not rain, men's star. They rode in late, just as the sun dipped low and bled the sky crimson. 3 of them. One carried a rifle across his lap, another had a grin that never touched his eyes. And leading them was Malcolm Riggs himself. He hadn't changed much, still wore the same hat, though now stained darker with sweat and liquor. His beard had grown wild and his eyes were bloodshot, but his posture was stiff with intent. Rosie stepped outside before Wyatt could. Malcolm reined in his horse and spat into the dirt. "Didn't think you'd have the guts to face me, girl." "I'm not your girl," she said. Wyatt stood behind her, silent but present. "You lost your bet, Malcolm," Wyatt said. "Go home." Malcolm laughed, a harsh, splintered sound. "I came for what's mine. She was never yours. She was born in my house, fed from my scraps. That makes her mine by sweat and law. There's no law here but what we make." The men beside him shifted. One fingered the grip of his pistol. The other leaned forward, itching for action. Malcolm sneered. "You think you can hide behind that shack forever? She's a burden boon. She'll break you like she broke her mama." Rosie's breath caught. Wyatt stepped forward. "That's enough." Malcolm drew. Wyatt moved faster. The shot rang out like thunder. One of Malcolm's men yelped, clutching his leg as he fell from the saddle. The other reached for his rifle, but Rosie had hers already raised. "Try it," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Malcolm's hand trembled. Wyatt's aim never did. "Leave," Wyatt said. Malcolm's face twisted into something ugly. But he pulled the reins, cursed under his breath, and turned his horse. They rode off into the twilight, dragging dust and threats behind them. Rosie lowered the rifle slowly. Her whole body trembled now. Wyatt put a hand on her shoulder. "You did good." She nodded, unable to speak. That night they didn't speak much. Just sat by the fire, close but quiet. The fear hadn't vanished, it had simply been named. That mattered more than pretending it didn't exist. Rosie looked at the flames and saw her past in them. Burning, flaring, turning to ash. And in the ashes something new waited. Not peace, but power. The days after the standoff passed in a strange kind of stillness, quiet on the surface, but under it, a tension buzzed like a coiled snake. Rosie kept working, her hands as busy as her thoughts. Every creak of the barn door, every crunch of gravel, every distant shout from the hills spun her head around. Wyatt didn't say much about that night, but his eyes never stopped moving. The rifle, once tucked away beneath the floorboards, now leaned in the corner by the door. Loaded. Ready. Rosie started rising earlier, often before the sun, slipping outside while the sky was still bruised with twilight. She liked the silence of that hour, the way the earth held its breath. It gave her space to think, and more than that, to feel. Because something was shifting inside her. A slow untangling. She wasn't sure when it started. Maybe when Wyatt stood between her and Malcolm, or maybe when she held her rifle steady and told a man with murder in his eyes to back down. Either way, she knew it now. She wasn't who she'd been. That girl, pale, frightened, folded in on herself, was somewhere in the past, drifting further every day. Still, ghosts had long fingers. The townsfolk started coming around more often. Not in crowds, never direct. But they watched. A trader passed by and left a sack of cornmeal on the fence without knocking. A woman on horseback nodded once from the ridge. A boy came to the door asking for eggs, and when Rosie gave him a basketful, he whispered, "You're the girl they talk about." Then he ran off without waiting for a reply. Wyatt noticed. Of course he did. "They're testin' the wind," he said one evening, polishing a lantern at the table. "Tryin' to figure which way it's blowin'. And what if it turns against us? Then we hold steady," he said. "Ain't the first storm I've weathered." Rosie watched the flame flicker inside the lantern glass. "It might be mine this time." He looked up. "Doesn't make it any less worth fightin'. His quiet faith in her, it was still a strange thing. Not heavy or loud, not filled with the flattery of men who wanted something. Just there. Like a steady horse beneath you, moving forward no matter how rough the path. One afternoon she returned from the creek with a bucket of water and found Wyatt in the barn, standing still, looking at an old saddle that hung from the wall like a ghost. His shoulders were slumped, not from pain but memory. "That Sam's?" she asked. He nodded. "He left it behind when he rode off. Said he'd come back for it." "He ever write?" "Once." Wyatt didn't elaborate. Rosie set the bucket down and crossed her arms. "You miss him?" "I miss what we were before the war." His voice was low. "That man don't exist anymore." "I don't think I do either, not in the way he remembers." She thought about her own before. Her mother's hands in her hair, the way the floorboards creaked in their old house, her father's laughter, once warm before it turned bitter. That girl had been soft, curious, open. "She's gone too," Rosie said. "The girl I used to be." Wyatt turned to her. "Good. She had to die so this one could live. That night she wrote her name in the dirt outside the shack. Just her first name. Then below it she wrote it again, bigger, bolder. Like carving it into the land would make it true. But truth, like blood, calls out. 3 days later Eli Thatcher returned. She saw him from the ridge before he reached the house, riding hard, sweat streaking his horse's flanks. She walked inside, picked up the rifle, and met Wyatt's eyes. Eli's back. Wyatt nodded. No surprise in his face. Just resolve. When Eli dismounted he didn't smile. "Got news?" he said. "Riggs is dead." Rosie froze. Wyatt leaned on the post. "Say again?" "Dead," Eli repeated. "Shot in the saloon 2 nights ago. Over a card game. They say he cheated, pulled his pistol, and caught one between the eyes." Rosie stared at the dirt. "Just like that?" Eli nodded. "Just like that." The quiet that followed was strange. Not relief. Not grief. Just vacancy. Like a fire that burned out before the house could fall. Eli cleared his throat. "But that's not the end of it. Riggs's cousin, Tommy Vance, is stirring up talk. Says Rosie's the reason Malcolm went mad. Claims you brainwashed him, turned him against his own blood." Rosie's face tightened. "He's not just talking," Eli continued. "He's gathering men. Says he's gonna drag you to the gallows in Grayson Hollow and let the town decide." "Lynch mob," Wyatt muttered. "Dressed up like justice," Eli confirmed. "But it'll be a noose and a tree if they catch her outside this ranch." Rosie turned away, fists clenched. "Let them come. I won't hide." Wyatt's voice was steel. "You won't run either." Eli looked between them. "I can buy you time. Ride to the sheriff, maybe get some sense talked into that crowd. But it won't last. You need to decide what this place is gonna be, a home or a fortress." He left at sundown. That night Rosie couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch wrapped in Wyatt's old coat, listening to the wolves sing in the hills and thinking about gallows and justice and the way people twist stories until they fit a comfortable lie. Wyatt stepped outside and sat beside her. "I used to think peace was a place," she said. "A quiet patch of land. A cabin. No trouble. It ain't." "No," she nodded slowly. "Peace is the fight you choose. It's the things you protect." Wyatt didn't speak for a long while. Then he said, "If it comes to it, we'll stand." Rosie turned to him. "Together?" He met her eyes. "Always." The next morning they prepared. Rosie oiled the rifle. Wyatt checked the ammunition. They boarded the windows, reinforced the door, and dug a shallow trench around the barn. It wasn't much, but it was enough to slow them, to make them think twice. They didn't know when the men would come. But they knew they would. And they'd be ready. The storm came before dawn. No thunder. No lightning. Just men, cloaked in shadows and dust, riding hard beneath a sliver of moonlight. Rosie heard them before she saw them, the dull drum of hooves across hard-packed earth, growing louder with every heartbeat. She was already awake, sitting in the chair by the door, rifle across her lap. When the sound reached her ears, she rose without hesitation and tapped Wyatt's door once. No words were needed. He emerged dressed, boots laced, revolver in hand. "They're here," she whispered. He only nodded. They'd rehearsed it. No dramatics. No shouting. Rosie took her position behind the window, its pane removed to make space for her barrel. Wyatt crouched behind the hay bales outside, hidden but close enough to draw them in. The traps had been set, jagged nails buried in the soil, logs stacked to collapse over the path, a bottle tied to a string that would shatter if stepped on. Now all they had to do was wait. Then the riders crested the ridge, 6 of them. Faces hidden under bandanas, guns strapped loose. Tommy Vance rode at the center, his posture cocky, the way of a man who'd never been told no, and thought it meant something. "Boone," he shouted, his voice cracking through the cold air. "You got 3 minutes to bring the girl out. We won't ask again." Rosie didn't move. She kept her breath slow, her cheek resting against the stock. Tommy waited, hand hovering near his holster. "Clock's ticking, Boone." Wyatt's voice rang out from the shadows. "You want her, come get her." A silence. Tight. Suffocating. Then motion. Tommy yanked his pistol skyward and fired once. The riders spread. The first man through the yard never saw the bottle tripwire. It snapped at his ankle, and the shattering glass was the last thing he heard before Rosie squeezed the trigger. Her bullet struck his chest and he crumpled like dry wheat. Gunfire erupted. Wyatt moved like he was born in the dust, popping up to fire, ducking down again before bullets struck where he'd been. Rosie took the second rider from her window, the crack of her rifle echoing into the hills. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. Her hands were steady, her eyes sharper than they'd ever been. The third man charged the door, shouting, "I see her." "I see." She fired again. Silence fell. Smoke hung in the air like ghosts. Tommy was still mounted, panting, fury flashing in his eyes. "You've made your choice," he bellowed. Wyatt stepped into the open, revolver raised. "So did you." The two men stared at each other. Old rage between them. Old sins too. "You think you're some kind of savior?" Tommy sneered. "You think hiding behind a broken girl makes you better?" Wyatt didn't flinch. "She ain't broken. She's tempered." Tommy screamed and fired. Wyatt ducked and shot back, clean practiced. The bullet struck Tommy in the shoulder, spinning him from the saddle. Rosie kicked the door open and marched down the steps. "Stay back," Wyatt warned. But she didn't stop. She walked straight to where Tommy writhed on the ground, clutching his wound, face twisted with hate. "You should have stayed in the bottle where you belong," she said coldly. He spat at her. "You don't matter. You're nothing." She leaned down, rifle pointed at his chest. "I mattered the day you started lying about me." "You think they'll believe you?" he hissed. "They want blood. That's what keeps them warm at night. I'm not afraid of what they want anymore." He laughed, bitter and wild. "You're just like your father." She stared at him for a long, long moment. "No," she said. "I'm nothing like him." Then she turned and walked away. By the time Eli arrived, the sun had risen. He came with the sheriff from the next county and a handful of deputies who looked like they'd been roused from bed and promised a good story. The sheriff took one look at the scene and sighed. "Hell of a mess." Wyatt nodded. "But a clean one." The sheriff questioned them, but the facts were hard to twist. Rosie hadn't gone hunting anyone. The men had come to take her. And they'd left in blood. Eli stood by her the whole time. "She's not the villain in this tale," he told the sheriff. "That one," he pointed to Tommy, now bandaged and slumped in the dirt, stirred a crowd with a lie. "She just happened to stand her ground better than he expected." Rosie said little during it. She didn't need to. Her story was etched in the dirt, the blood, the quiet strength in her spine. Eventually the sheriff nodded. "No charges." Tommy was taken away. He didn't look back. When the deputies rode off, Rosie sat on the porch, her rifle across her knees. Eli stood beside her, arms crossed. "You've changed," he said. "I had to." "I mean it," he added. "When I first came here, you were shadow and bone. Now I'm something else." He smiled. "Boone was right about you." "He usually is," she said quietly. That night, she stood at the fence and looked out at the land. Not just a patch of dirt anymore. Not a hiding place. Home. Wyatt joined her, silent for a time. Then he said, "You scared me today." "Good," she said. "That means I'm doing something right." He smiled at that. "You're not the girl I took in," he said. "I hope not." "What are you now?" She took a breath. "I'm a woman who's still learning. Still fighting. Still waking up in a world that tried to end me, but didn't." The stars glimmered above them, ancient and silent. Wyatt looked at her. "You planning to stay?" "I think I already have." He nodded, then handed her something small. "A key." "To the shed," he said. "Thought it was time you had your own." She looked at the key, then at him. "It's not much," he added. "But it's yours." Rosie didn't reply. She just took the key and wrapped her fingers around it like it was made of gold. In the distance, coyotes howled. The kind of wild music only the West could make. Rosie turned her face to the wind and let it carry away the last fragments of the girl she used to be. The pain. The silence. The fear. And in their place, she let something new grow. Not innocence. Not even peace. But purpose. And purpose would carry her farther than fear ever could.